The doctor came back with the news and he's like, Griff, your back is broken. We're going to do surgery in 2 days. You'll never walk, you'll never stand, you'll never move your legs again. It was the end of the summer season, getting ready to go back to school to focus on my dream of playing football in college on the big stage for BYU. I get a phone call from Napoleon Dynamite country to do the construction. I had 2 levels of scaffolding, a 30-foot ladder on top of that, and I went to the top of the barn instantly. I knew I was in trouble. The scaffolding and ladder slipped out from underneath me. I come crashing down, fell about 40 feet. L1 vertebrae exploded inside me. Your identity has been all wrapped up in your physicality, how fast you can run, how high you can jump, how well you can catch. And now here you are on the ground. You can't even roll over. You can't even move. What's next? Fortunately for me, I had something happen to me in the hospital that changed my life, that helped me exit that sauna of self-pity, that helped me flip the switch and reframe things, to reframe my mess into a message. They stopped feeding me in the hospital, in bed. So if I wanted to eat, I had to get out. And I'm rolling to the cafeteria. I get to the line. I get my food. I go to the corner of the cafeteria. I put the tray right down there, and I'm flavoring my food with my tears, and I just want to be left alone, and then this tray just plops in front of me. And he asked a question that set me free from my prison. And the question that he asked me was, why are you crying, dude? And in his slurred speech, I recognized the question that changed my life forever. I was able to at least feed myself. I was able to at least give people hugs. I was able to at least feel hugs. Why are you crying, dude?
This is an interview with Jeff Griffin. Jeff is a paraplegic. You'll see that he's in a wheelchair, and that's because 30 years ago, when he was 21, he fell 50 feet off of a ladder and landed on his back, and his life would never be the same. We talk about how this changed him completely, but one of the things that I love about Jeff, and you saw this with Charla as well, is just his attitude towards life. You know, all of us are going through something difficult, our own rock bottom experiences. But when you listen to somebody like Jeff, who literally can't walk, can't do just normal everyday functions, and you hear his positivity and you see his smile and you see how high on life he is, it gave me a lot of hope. And I think it'll give you a lot of hope too. Jeff now plays or played for several years in the Paralympic Games as a basketball player. He was a national champion. He was a 4-time All-Star. He was an All-Star MVP. And he has 2 Guinness Book of World Records. So he's incredibly accomplished out of that wheelchair that you see him in. And so welcome to the Rollercoaster Podcast. Strap in, and thank you for being here. Jeff Griffin, welcome to the Rollercoaster Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being on. Nearly 30 years ago, September of 94, you were living a relatively normal life, and your life would change forever on that day. So in detail, describe from the time you woke up to the time you went to bed, what you remember about that day.
Absolutely. It was the end of the summer season. It was the end of me working for myself, starting my own business as a painter, not pictures, but buildings. Yeah. I get a phone call from Napoleon Dynamite country. This woman wants me to do a bid on her barn. And 3 days later and $3,000 richer, I'd have enough money to go back and focus on football and get my bullet bike. I was excited to get a bullet bike because every time I saw a guy on a bullet bike, there was a lady on back. and in my mind, I'm like, the chicks dig the wheels. And it wasn't until I got in a wheelchair, Tyler, that I realized that the chicks dig the wheels. I'm almost ready, not wanting to give up my wheelchair now because of how much the chicks dig the wheels. But I've been married to the same woman for quite some time. But it's been the summer season is ending, getting ready to go back to school to focus on my dream of playing football in college on the big stage. I was recruited by Lavelle Edwards to go and play for BYU. Went up to Rick's College instead to start, my career. And in between seasons was was working. And so that morning I wake up, get the equipment, head up to the job site, which is just north of the border. I lived in Cache Valley. And the irony is I grew up in Aggie country where they breed them to hate them, down south to where I wanted to go to, and picked up my buddy, and we went up to the barn to do the construction and to get the painting done. So I had 2 levels of scaffolding, a 30-foot ladder on top of that, and I went to the top of the barn to get it done. And that infamous feeling that everybody has felt in grade school when you're leaning back on your chair and you tip over and your stomach up to your mouth, down to your legs again, felt that feeling. And instantly, I knew I was in trouble. The scaffolding and ladder slipped out from underneath me. I come crashing down to the ground, fell about 40 feet, stuck the landing perfect. Legs came up, back came down, L1 vertebrae exploded inside me. And the pain was so excruciating. It felt like an underground cavernous explosion had just coursed down my body, down my legs, down my arms, and out my fingertips and toes. And it felt like they had just blown off. And the pain was so excruciating that I reached down and grabbed my legs with my hands, and my hands could feel my legs, but my legs couldn't feel my hands at the time. But I was hoping, beyond hope, that it was kind of like a stinger that you get in football. You go tackle somebody, you hit, your arm goes numb, give it a few seconds, sometimes minutes, and it comes back, and you're like, yes. So there I found myself next to an unpainted barn in the fields of Napoleon Dynamite there in Preston, Idaho. I'd fallen 40 feet. My dreams of playing football came crashing down. My dreams of riding a motorcycle came crashing down. I'm lying there on my back. My buddy recovers from his small little fall, and he comes over and he starts shaking me. He's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I don't think you should be doing that." And I remember telling my buddy for the first time out loud, voicing my fears for the first time out loud, that I think I'm paralyzed. I'm like, "Doug, I think I'm paralyzed. Go call the ambulance." And so he takes off. He leaves me there all by myself to wrestle with those thoughts that came crashing in as well, which was, okay, now what? Your identity has been all wrapped up in your physicality, how fast you can run, how high you can jump, how well you can catch. And now here you are on the ground. You can't even roll over. You can't even move. What's next? And what came next was I eventually got to the hospital. The doctor took a picture of my back with an x-ray, came back with the news, and he gave me the news that just put me into that sauna of self-pity, as I call it, where I was walling around and, in that syrupy, sticky sauna of self-pity that we all go to at times when we have these challenges and these setbacks, these major ones, when our identity is just crushed or taken away from us. Our dreams come crashing down to the ground, and the doctor came back with the news, and he's like, "Griff, your back is broken. We're going to do surgery in 2 days. You'll never walk, you'll never stand, you'll never move your legs again." That was the news that I got that day. The room began to circle. I'm like, I can't take anymore. And there was like a heavyweight boxer, the knockout punch came next, where he just gave me the news. He's like, not only will you not move your legs again, you're not going to have any children. 0% chance of having kids, because that's the first function to go, last to come back. Now, some of the experts told me I wouldn't get married, not because of my wheelchair, but just because of who I am. But I can happily say that my wife and I have just celebrated 27 years. We have 4 beautiful biological kids, and I can get up out of my chair and take some steps forward.
I interview a lot of people who have been through deeply traumatic experiences like this. And, I have as well. We talked about this a little bit, right? So what's when you get this news, you're obviously physically in some excruciating pain, but the pain probably subsided for a minute as the mental pain and fatigue started to set in around the reality of the rest of your life, right? So what do you recall about what's going through your head when you received this news?
Oh, it was crazy. It was the worst news I've ever received in my life. And like I mentioned before, I went into that sauna of self-pity. You know, when we're hurt, we don't want to be around anybody. And that's the worst thing to do.
Yeah, let's be alone.
Is to be alone. But that's what we want to do, is we want to retreat. We want to go. We want to just be left alone. And you know, I would put on a happy face when people came, because they came to console me. But what happened is I ended up consoling them. Mm-hmm. So that was exhausting as well, mentally. But I just remembered, I'm like, oh my goodness, because I had to have a nurse come in and roll me over every 2 hours so I wouldn't get bed sores. I had to have a nurse help me go to the bathroom. I had to have several nurses help me get out of my bed into my wheelchair to go use the restroom. Everything I used to do, which was very, very easy, took minutes, if not hours. Putting on my pants, 30 minutes, just get my pants on. That was before I had to put on the tights. And they made me wear tights so I wouldn't get the blood clots and whatnot. And so just everything that a young man whose identity and focus was his physicality was just stripped away. Having to be dressed, having to be helped to use the bathroom, having to help to get out of the bed into my chair. And so, you know, I went from being independent to dependent on everything. And so I just went into a tailspin, went into that sauna of self-pity and just wallowed around, as I mentioned before, in that syrupy, sticky sauna of self-pity. And, but fortunately for me, it happened much quicker than a lot of people do. Everyone always says that, hey, you know, we just have to wait until they hit rock bottom. I don't know if you've heard that before. You just got to wait till they hit rock bottom. I'm here to tell you that rock bottom has a basement.
Yeah, I love that quote.
So don't wait until you hit rock bottom, because rock bottom has a basement.
Yeah.
And so fortunately for me, I had something happen to me in the hospital that changed my life, that helped me exit that sauna of self-pity, that helped me flip the switch and reframe things, to reframe my mess into a message, to reframe this crap and look at it as an opportunity to turn it into a crop. And, you know, they stopped feeding me. They stopped feeding me in the hospital, in bed. So if I wanted to eat, I had to get out and go to the cafeteria. So I struggled, put my clothes on, got my body brace on, had to, you know, click the button for the nurse to come help me, got into my wheelchair eventually, and I'm rolling down the sterile halls of the hospital, and I'm crying. I'm having the biggest pity party I've ever had before. And I'm rolling to the cafeteria. I get to the line. I get my food. You know how you want to be left alone. I go to the corner of the cafeteria. I put the tray right down there, and I'm flavoring my food with my tears, and I just want to be left alone. And this tray just plops in front of me. And I look up, and there's this guy. I'm about to tell him to go take a hike with some colorful words that I'm not going to use right now. And before I could say anything, he asked a question that set me free from my prison, that helped me exit this sauna of self-pity, that helped me flip the switch, reframe things, and stop looking at the negative, stop looking at everything that I didn't have anymore. Stop looking at the fact that I can't run routes, that I can't catch balls, that I can't put on my pants, I can't use the restroom by myself, that I can't do all these things, that I can't have kids. Everyone always asks me, what's the toughest thing about being in a wheelchair? Is it that you can't walk? And I'm like, well, there's some other things that I could talk about that you would feel uncomfortable talking about that is worse than not being able to walk. But this gentleman who's on the other side of the table, come to find out he is a prisoner from the state prison. He was lifting weights, had an aneurysm in his brain, paralyzed the right side of his body, couldn't speak. So he's learning how to rehab there in the hospital. And what's ironic is this prisoner asked me a question that set me free from my prison. And the question that he asked me was, why are you crying, dude? And I'm like, what? He's like, why are you crying, dude? And in his slurred speech, I recognized the question that changed my life forever. And the question that he asked me was, why are you crying, dude? Boom, instantly. It was like the heavyweight boxer actually knocking me out, knocking some sense into me. He's like, Griff, why are you crying, man? Because instantly I noticed things that I didn't notice before. Like there was a gentleman down the table who was paralyzed from the neck down. He had a halo screw to his skull. Couldn't even feed himself. I was able to at least feed myself. I was able to at least give people hugs. I was able to at least feel hugs. And the guy right next to him was paralyzed from the neck down too, and he had some movement, and they had taped a fork to his thumb, and he's trying to feed himself. And by the time he gets the fork to his mouth, all the morsels had fallen off, and he's just struggling just to eat. I can feed myself. Why are you crying, dude? That snapped me out of my pity party. I exited the sauna, and I haven't looked back since. I flipped the switch, and I reframe things. I look at things that I can do instead of what I can't do.
Yeah.
And so mentally, that was an ugly, dark moment for me. But fortunately, it wasn't a long period that a lot of people find themselves in.
Yeah.
For me, it was just a couple of weeks. But those weeks were dark and ugly, and I don't ever want to go back. Haven't been back. There's been tough times, disappointing times.
But not like that.
But nothing like that.
Yeah. It's a beautiful story. You see me wearing this levels. There are levels to rock bottom. I mean, they get deeper, right? And I have a couple of great examples. You know, Brad Jensen, the sober bodybuilder.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
love that man.
I had Brad on the show, and it's like, you know, I've met with and kind of worked with several addicts. And like Brad's level of addict is like, it's like, show me something deeper. I mean, that is some deep stuff, right? Like the deeper, I guess, is he ends up dead, right? Mm-hmm. That's like the next level, but he was all the way down, or as deep as I've seen. Another great example that I've seen of this is I remember, you know, Mason Sawyer.
Mm-hmm.
I remember talking to Mason about this and saying, dude, like, I don't know that, you know, when you share your story with the world, everybody's going through their own version of something hard. And then they hear that you lost essentially your entire family in a car accident, and their hard becomes a little less hard. And he goes, yeah, but my hard's not the worst hard. Like, what's worse? Name it. And he goes, you know, I've had people on my show where it's worse. Like a mother watches her son fall into a raging river, jumps in to save him, and has him. And then he gets swept away by the river, and she watches him die. At least I didn't have to watch my kids die. He said, I interviewed a lady who's was at dinner, and I think it was her father was there with her and her husband and all of her kids. And he said he had to go to the bathroom, and he proceeded to jump in his car and drive it through the window where we were sitting and killed everybody except for her, right in front of her. It's like, that's another level, right? So it's like, you know, I watched your post when you were talking about rock bottom and rock bottom having a basement, like it just keeps going. And I think that perspective is an incredible one to live by when you've been through something challenging. I want to ask you this. A couple of months ago, I walked into the sauna at my gym, and I walk in, there's one gentleman in there. And normally, like, speaking of sauna, right, when I go in the sauna, I'm kind of like in my own world. I don't want to talk to people. I've got my headphones in. Usually I put a towel over my head.
Right.
And I just kind of looked up at this kid, 21 years old, and he had a prosthetic leg. And I remember just saying, hey, man, what's your story? You know, what happened to you? I said, are you willing to talk about it, right? He's like, yeah, of course. And so, super nice kid. Said his story when he was younger. He was in a really bad car accident, and lost his leg. And I remember asking him, I said, he's probably like, who's this deep guy? Just like what I do. I can't do anything other, right? And he goes, I said, have you ever felt sorry for yourself because of your situation? And he said, I used to. He said, but not for many, many years. He said, now I feel like I have a competitive advantage on everybody else that has two legs. And he said, I think I was blessed with this because I now have a permanent chip on my shoulder. And he was in shape, and he was, you could just tell he had this mindset that was like, no, this is good. Don't get it twisted. Right. Do you ever feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you're talking about this chip on your shoulder. People call it grit, to grind, whatever it is. I believe there's 4 sources of resilience that are out there, main sources. I experienced them as I went through this journey and whatnot. One source is relational. Where you rely upon a loved one, or a loved one relies upon you. I don't know if you've ever seen that. The Team Hoyt group. Rick Hoyt. He's a father who would take his son, who couldn't speak, couldn't move, was in a wheelchair. The doctors said that you got to institutionalize him, and he's like, no, I'm not going to. And so then he went on. He would do several Ironmen with his son. He would drag his son in a boat for 2.5 miles. He'd put his son in the front of a bike for 112 or whatever it is, and then he'd put him in a stroller and push him the 26.2 miles of the marathon. And when a reporter asked him who benefits more, he's like, I do. The dad's like, I do. My son pushes me. And so you got relational resilience. And then another one is what I call the just don't quit. It's not necessarily the I just don't quit one. It's the you can't. I don't know if you've ever been told that before. Or you can't do this and you can't do that, and it's disrespect. It's like, no, tell me that I can't, and I'll show you that I can.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the the street resilience. It's the resilience of you can't do this resilience, and so you tap into that, and that one can get you, can motivate you. Karl Malone was left off the All-Star ballot, and he went out and scored 54 points the next night because he was a little upset. Michael Jordan was famous for doing that. He'd find reasons why people were disrespecting him, and get into that. And so if you're not careful, that can wear you out and destroy you. It's like shocks. It's the weight, it's the weight and the disrespect that kind of propels you, moves you forward. And it's similar to the weight in the back of a truck. If you're stuck, that weight helps you get out when you're stuck. But if you leave that weight in the back of the truck, what's going to happen to your shocks and struts? Yep. It's going to wear out. And so, I've tapped into that quite a bit. In fact, in my competitive years in football, but a lot lately it was basketball, wheelchair basketball. People would just, I'd be disrespected. I'm like, okay, here we go, game on. But I'm learning that for me, that's short-lived energy. The disrespect and the you can't is short-lived energy.
Yeah, get a little jolt.
Yeah, and what you want to do is you want to have that energy that lasts, that's enduring.
Yeah,
longevity. And but yeah, absolutely. We it was like, Griff, you can't do this. All right, well, let's do it. I just climbed a mountain, 9,711 feet back in 2019.
How do you do that?
Right?
You can't do that.
No, you can't do that. There's no way you could do that. And so I recruited to 20 people from my neighborhood, and we're like, hey, let's build some portable, what are those things called? Parallel bars. Let's build some portable parallel bars, and 2 gentlemen would alternate, and they put a strap around their neck, and I'd be in the middle, and I'd hold on to it, and we just worked our way up to the top of the mountain. Took me 3 hours to get up, 4 hours to get down.
Nice.
But I was able to take every step to the top, and
it's awesome.
And so, yes, absolutely. I find myself tapping into that more. The older I get, the more I realize, there's some other ones that are more, they last longer.
Let me ask you about this one. So, like, I'm assuming a lot of the times it's not actually somebody vocally saying you can't do that, but it's maybe the way they treat you or interact or body language, facial expressions when you say you're going to go do something, right? So, like, have you felt, like, how does it feel when somebody meets you for the first time and they immediately just kind of downplay you and baby you and, oh, hey buddy, it's good to meet you, handicapped guy. Like do you still feel that at this age in your life, people kind of doing that? Does that fuel you?
It used to fuel me as in you're disrespecting me. Like I remember the first time so my dream was to head down to BYU, went up to Rick's, got hurt from Cache Valley. So I stayed at Utah State. I remember going into the gym for the first time in my wheelchair. The gym's a loud place. Weights are clinking, there's music's on, people are grunting. I go rolling in and the place just goes quiet. It's like they turned the volume down, everyone stopped lifting and everyone started staring. Like, dude, how's this guy in a wheelchair going to lift weights?
Yeah.
So I go over to the bench and I put 45 plates on because I don't know what I can do. I transfer onto the bench, lean back, get the weight and start working out. And everyone looked at me like, oh, okay. So then it seemed like the volume turned back up. Everyone started lifting and it started getting noisy again. But that same year, I took a swimming class and they were playing water polo. And they did the backyard picking teams, like, what's happening.
Let me guess where you got picked.
I got picked last. The guy in the wheelchair got picked last. Because water polo, you got to use your legs to stay, I'm like, I got my arms, I can do some stuff. I'm like, tell me that I can't and I'll show you that I can. And so I got picked last and then I got put in the goalie. I got put in the goalie because I had to hold on to the side of the swimming pool. And I remember stopping the ball and just out of anger, just threw the ball across the pool, skipped right in front of the goalie and went into the net. And there's a little piece of me like, vindication, being picked last, scoring a goal. Yeah. But yes, that happens all the time. But it eventually got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do this out of spite. I'm going to do this because it's what's inside of me. It's the song that drives me forward. It's the song that sings inside my soul. And so, I stopped looking at the disrespect. I stopped looking for those moments to kind of fuel me. And to the point where I was going on a 3-city stop tour to go speak. And the gentleman who was with me after the second airport experience, he's like, Griff, do you realize that everyone stares at you? And I'm like, no, I don't. But I did at the beginning. I noticed everybody was stop and stare. Yeah. And at first it was like they're staring because I'm disabled. But like I said before, you got to flip the switch and reframe things. So instead of thinking that they're staring out of pity or whatever, I'm like, the chicks dig the wheels. they dig the guy in the wheelchair. And so I was like, hey, listen, absolutely. And so when I go out on stage, I try to disarm everybody and saying, listen, let's just address the elephant in the room about how good looking I am. And it just disarms everybody. And so I used to look for those things, but now I'm looking for the other things that has the longevity, that has the fuel that's going to take me to the distance.
Yeah. Yeah, beautifully said. You talked about this idea of dependence and independence. Mm-hmm. What are things that you today are still dependent on somebody else to help you with? And maybe like, what is your outlook and perspective towards that person or those people who are there to support you?
Yeah, great question. And I'm still working on it. I'm still working on allowing other people to serve me, allowing other people to help me, because I don't know if it's subconscious. I don't know if it's so deeper than I think it is, but I don't want people to think that I'm disabled. I don't want people to think that I'm handicapped.
Yeah.
I go golfing and people look at me like, oh crap, he's on my foursome. And I'm like, don't let my handicap fool you.
Yeah.
And we get out there and do that. But I remember one time somebody was telling me, Griff, you need to allow people to help you. You need to allow people to help you. And I'm in college and I want to open the door for myself. I want to do everything for myself because I don't want people to see the wheelchair. I don't want people to see that I'm disabled. Because I'm not disabled here. I just can't walk. I just can't go from point A to point A with my chair. But I didn't want people to think that I was disabled in all aspects of my life. So when people would ask me if they could get the door for me, I'm like, no. Someone's like, Griff, you got to allow people to help you. So I'm like, okay. So the next time somebody asked me if they could get the door for me, I swallow my pride. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you can get the door for me. And the guy turns to the wall, hits the button, and the door goes, meh. I'm like, I look that disabled? Come on, Tyler. I'm like, do I look that disabled that I can't even push the button? And so my pride is hit, and I'm like, I know that our pride gets hit all the time. People are pushing the button when we can do that. But I've also learned too that I'm like, okay, well, for this person, that's how he wanted to help, was to push the button. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. And I've learned playing team sports, football, wheelchair basketball, on the NBA, the wheelchair NBA level, and the international level on the Paralympic teams, that team really does mean together everyone achieves more. Yeah. And if you want to go fast, you go it alone. If you want to go far, you got to go with the team. And I'm telling you right now that your legacy is not going to last unless you do it with the team. And so you've got to allow other people to help you, and learn how to help them as well. And what I've learned doing a lot of coaching myself is that these high-level leaders, they don't know how to ask for help. They don't know how to receive help. It's like the Heisman pose, the Heisman trophy. They've got their little thing right here in their arm. It's secure. Like, I've got this. And then they're stiff-arming everyone else because they think what they have is enough. And in reality, there could be more.
Yeah. Thank you to our sponsors over at Bucked Up. I love this company. I love their products, their apparel, and their supplements. Recently, they dropped the mother of all pre-workouts, Mother Bucker. This is not for the faint of heart. This will make you want to claw your face off. So don't get stuck in traffic when you're headed to the gym. I love these guys. I love this company, and I love their products. They are clearly the best tasting pre-workout on the entire market, and they're number one for a reason. Bucked Up is my favorite workout brand, hands down. And they also have my favorite apparel for working out and just for daily life. It's Lululemon-like quality, but for a fraction of the price that's affordable. So head over to their site, buckedup.com, where you can check it out. And for 20% off their entire site, use the code TylerHall20. I want to talk about this wheelchair basketball thing.
Yeah.
You're wearing a pretty cool jacket. Before we do that, in fact, let's go there now. So how do you, first of all, how do you even get into this, right? It's like, I think some people probably have this, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but they have this misconception that I just interviewed a paraplegic who was in an accident 18 months ago, a weightlifting accident. She was a professional bodybuilder, was squatting, and the squat rack came down and compressed her spine, and now she's in a wheelchair, and she's now competing at the Olympia level wheelchair division, right? So but I think people look at that and go, oh, it's probably easy. It's probably easy to play on the Olympic U.S. team because there's not that many of you in a wheelchair, right?
Right.
So it's but I'm assuming it's not as hard as making the NBA, but I'm also assuming it's not easy. There's nothing easy about getting there. So what's your journey like to get to the world's highest stage playing wheelchair basketball?
Absolutely. First of all, you got to be in a wheelchair.
You can't be able to walk.
I'm just kidding. We've got some teammates who are amputees, and so you just have to have one of your limbs not being able to function. There's some people who play that have their toes missing. Just, they're highly functionable. They walk, they get around. They would be classified as a 4-5. So it ranges from 4-5 to 1.0.
Okay, so some of them can walk.
Correct.
But they're playing in the wheelchair league.
Correct.
Okay.
And so you've got 15 points that are on the court. The court is the exact same as the regular court. It's 10 feet standards. It's played aggressively. There's technical fouls. There's ejections. There's a lot of personalities, if you can say that. But what people don't understand is most NBA teams has a wheelchair affiliate team. And so the All-Star event in February, we would kick off the events on Thursday. It started on Thursday. We'd kick it off. We'd leave on Friday, and the big boys would come in Friday. And I'd like to think that the big boys have already showed up and played. But most people don't even know that there is an NBA wheelchair league. and it's been going on for decades now. But there's over 2,000 wheelchair basketball players in the United States, ranging from juniors, peewees to collegiate. There's a collegiate league that's out there as well to the championship level. Yeah. 24 get an invitation to go try out there at Colorado Springs Olympic Training Center. And so just to kind of give you the idea of how difficult it is to compete for these 12 spots that are on the national team. And in a wheelchair basketball is you're pushing with your arms, you're passing with your arms, you're defending with your arms, you're shooting with your arms. So everything's done with your arms. And so you got to learn how to shoot the shot a little bit different. You can't bend your knees. Even though that's one of my favorite things to tell my teammates when they miss, I'm like, bend your knees. and they're like, that's not funny, Griff. But John Apsby, he was the original Jazz Bear, one of the most athletic persons that I've ever met, and amazing. He would outcompete the gorilla.
The Sun's gorilla.
Yeah,
that's my guy.
Absolutely. So those two would come up with these ideas and whatnot, and so we would go and do the halftime games for the Jazz. And the people loved the Jazz Bear. They loved John.
Yeah.
So we put him in a chair just to kind of give you an idea of how difficult this is. So we put him in a chair, and I told John, I'm like, hey, listen, I want you to aim for the top of the backboard because you're going to come up short. And so we get him into position. Most of the people are sticking around, not going to concessions because like, oh, this is pretty fascinating and pretty cool. And we get the ball to John, and John shoots the shot, and he comes up 5 feet short. I'm like, bro, top of the backboard. So we gave another shot, and he was able to make it. But it is a difficult competitive sport. Our rims hit each other, sparks fly, tempers fly, and we score anywhere from 60 to 100 points a game, depending on the competition.
12-minute quarters?
So 10-minute.
10-minute quarters?
10-minute quarters.
Yeah. Can guys shoot the long ball in a wheelchair? Like you got Steph Curry type guys at the NBA level in wheelchair ball?
Wheelchair ball. In fact, some of my teammates just competed in the Paralympics in Paris that were with me in 2004.
Yeah.
They got a gold medal, and there's some good shooters, and it's extended. When we used to play, it was the top of the key. Now it's extended to the NBA level where you've got that gap beyond there. And there's people who are drilling it 40%, 50% shooters from out there. What? Without bending their legs.
Is because I played basketball pretty high level, could have played D2 in college kind of thing. So understand this sport really well. Defensively, can you go by somebody in a wheelchair? Can you blow past somebody for okay.
Yeah.
And can somebody actually get a hand up in your face the same way you could playing normal ball?
Yeah.
Defending you. Somebody could actually block a 3-pointer if they wanted to.
Yeah, you go to the side, you block it. Some people tilt on their wheels. That's as much height as we get, really? Air. And so they can tilt, so they can block, and it gets really competitive. But, you're not defending somebody with your hands because then they'll blow by you. You got to have your hands on your wheels, and so it's positioning. That's really the key. If you can get position, that is key, and you can shut people down. And we've had some really, really good battles over these years, and have had a lot of fun. And people don't realize how difficult it is. And so what we've done is we've put together an opportunity for executive teams to get together, put them in wheelchairs, and let them compete, because once you put an athlete into a chair, they become disabled. You put a person who doesn't play basketball, you put them in a chair, they're on the same level. Yeah. And Jeremy Neves, I don't know if you know who he is.
I had dinner with him last night.
Okay. Yeah. So you should ask him about his experience with this, but do we bring everyone together? And, these athletes who compete, you put them in a chair, they're like, oh my goodness. The high score is 8 points in an 8-minute quarter. That's all that's being scored is 8 points in 8 minutes. And but what's beautiful is we take this experience, this executive leadership experience, put them in wheelchairs, and then we're able to have some conversations because we break down barriers. We break down walls because how you pass and how you dribble and how you do all these things, everyone is on the same level, same playing field. Now you take them out, you give them some leadership messaging and be able to have some difficult conversations because you're able to play a little bit on the court. Now you're like, okay, let's relate this. Let's take these principles and let's relate them to what's struggling in the boardroom or in the company. And so it's a lot of fun to give them that experience.
Now, final question about basketball. Can anybody dunk?
We've tried to. We're talking about getting a ramp and trying to do all that stuff, but no, it's exactly the
Nobody's
same.
ever dunked
except
in a wheelchair.
we play underneath the rim.
Yeah,
there is no dunking at all with wheelchair basketball, but we've been trying to figure out a way to do that, and it doesn't work. I don't see it happening anytime soon.
Yeah. So, I mean, just for those who are listening, I'm going to read some statistics, right? So, played in the 2004 Paralympic Games in Athens, Greece. Silver medalist. We'll have to talk about why you didn't win that game. National champion in the wheelchair NBA, 4-time All-Star MVP. Did I get that right?
You did.
Okay, four-time All-Star MVP. 2 Guinness Book of World Records. You've wrote 2 award-winning books. And you've created now a worldwide peer-to-peer leadership program. And so you've done a lot. You've got some amazing accolades. And, I think one of the things I'd love to talk about on here is the accolades are great. It's fine, but it's not who you are, right? It's not your identity. It's what you've done and maybe what you do, right? So talk to me about your identity. Like, people see you and they probably automatically label you as whatever they want to, right? Handicap guy, disabled, good looking.
I was going to make sure we got that one in there.
Good hair, nice smile, articulate, right? They're going to label you how they want to, but who are you really at your core?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that. And one thing that I discovered while teaching some of the harshest critics called teenagers for 17 years, when on the first day of class, I'd ask them to, when I called their name, finish this sentence, I am.
Yeah.
Because those 2 words followed by who you are some of the most powerful words that you'll ever hear and say. And what's interesting is they would say, I'm like, hey, Jane, I am a cheerleader. Joe, I am a football player. Logan, I am a self-proclaimed nerd. I still remember that one. And so what was interesting is, without fail, for 17 years, they would continue to tell me and constantly tell me the things that they did and the roles that they had instead of who they are.
Yep.
And so for me, I would say that I am a self-righteous fraud. That's part of who I am. Not who I want to be, but I've identified that I am a self-righteous fraud.
Yep.
I am not as good as I think I am. I try to be perfect. I try to do all these things. Listen, I'm just telling you right now, I am a self-righteous fraud. And when people know me and hang out with me and see what I do, they're like, Griff, that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit. And I'm like, good. I don't want it to fit anymore. That's who I'm no longer wanting to be.
Yeah.
But if you were to ask me today who I am, I would tell you that I am a powerful, authentic, lovable, and fun man. I am a child of God. That's who I am, in my core and in my essence. And I want people to remember me, Jeff Griffin, when I die, as a man who lightened their loads, lifted their spirits, and loved them. When people leave my presence, leave the time that they've had with me, I want them to remember me as a man who lightened their spirits, lightened their loads, lifted their spirits, and loved them.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I want to end with this. You said that all accidents are mistakes, but not all mistakes are accidents.
Mm-hmm.
What did you mean by that?
It was associated with going back to this self-righteous fraud, being perfect, this perfection, this idea of perfection, that we need to be perfect. And this idea of, that, we relate perfection or the opposite of perfection as wickedness and sin.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. What's interesting is a lot of people will define all mistakes as sins. And what's interesting is it's, you could relate that to failures as well. A lot of times we can learn what something is by what it isn't.
Yeah.
And I always ask people, I'm like, what's the opposite of success? If we really want to know what success is, what's the opposite of success? And people go, that's failure. And I'm like, no, I've never met anybody who has not failed their way to success. Failure is part of success. Mm-hmm. And so going back to this idea of, where people have compared mistakes to sins. And so I'm like, all right, all sins are mistakes, but not all mistakes are sins. So going back to the idea of all accidents, all mistakes are accidents, but all accidents aren't mistakes. Or however we said that.
Yeah, that's right.
But this idea of we strive to be perfect, and we've defined and refined and said that this is what a sin is. This is what an accident is. This is what the opposite of success is. And what's interesting is by doing this, we haven't allowed ourselves to live. We haven't allowed ourselves to make those mistakes, which is part of living. And we haven't allowed ourselves to fail, which is part of living, which is part of success.
Yeah.
And so this idea of flipping the switch and reframing things to what it really is. And instead of defining it as what it isn't, let's define it for what it is. And so for me, it's like, hey, listen, let's start redefining what people have tried to define that keeps us held back, that keeps us from moving forward. And so for me, I think that we have tried to get people to focus on the problem all the time. We define the problem, we refine the problem, and then we spend so much time on the problem that we don't spend enough time on the solution. And so if we can just identify the fact that, hey, listen, all sins are mistakes, but not all mistakes are sins. And so make mistakes. Fail forward. Give yourself permission to fail, because failures at first are triumphs at last, as long as you just don't quit. And so start living. We always sit back and wait to start living, and we don't do anything because we're afraid to fail. Because if I fail, that's the opposite of success. And if I fail, then I'm not successful, so I'm not going to do anything. But listen, I believe most of us are barely breathing and calling it a life instead of living a life that takes our breath away, because we get caught up in that negativity, in those definitions that try to define us. And that's not who we are. We are individuals who have the ability to achieve our dreams and desires. We come from infinite intelligence. So why not follow that and move forward and chase down your dreams that's inside you, to orchestrate and conduct that song that sings inside your soul. And so anyway, that's what I mean by that is, hey, listen, let's flip the switch, let's refine, and let's live a life that takes our breath away instead of barely breathing and calling it a life.
Beautifully said. Jeff, thanks for joining the Rollercoaster Podcast.
This has been a ride.
Thanks, man.
Yes.
It's a wrap.